Bonjour, Anine, and welcome to the 8th installment of our 2021 GLIER TRUS virtual seminar series. My name is Colleen Lynn, and I'm a PhD student in anthropology and urban sustainability at Wayne State University.
And Annie, my name is Madison Dugdale. I'm a master's student in environmental science at the University of Windsor.
We are your hosts for today's seminar. I want to extend a big miigwech to all of our panelists for being here today, as well as to all of you who are choosing to listen in on a Friday morning.
To begin, we'd like to acknowledge that the University of Windsor and Wayne State University sits on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, Anishinaabeg, Peoria, Miamia, and the Mississauga Nations.
We, as the Windsor and Wayne communities, would like to move beyond acknowledgements, and we would like to not only give our respect to the traditional territory we are on, but also commit to learning and growing, starting with our partnerships and collaborations moving forward.
This is the first panel seminar in the new year, and we are excited to announce that our next seminar will be a nonprofit panel focusing on topics such as environmental issues and how to facilitate change. Save the date for Friday, February 12th at 10 a.m. and stay tuned for more information to come.
And today, our panelists will be discussing and taking questions related to traditional ecological knowledge and how to best inspire the next generation of environmental stewards.
Allow us to explain how we arrived at today's panel specifically. Back in the summer and fall of 2020, the GLIER TRUS graduate students and faculty involved in the seminar planning brainstormed topics and featured speakers with traditional ecological knowledge and environmental sustainability being a topic of interest and high priority. Over the past few months, we've engaged possible panel members, and last week, the co-host team gathered with the panelists to listen and reflect on ideas for topics of interest within their work and communities.
We as a graduate student group have reflected on those conversations and prepared a list of questions and topics related to environmental sustainability and themes of intergenerational knowledge, language, invasive species, climate change, and engaging knowledge keepers and youth, just to name a few. This panel extends on that discussion, and we are grateful that all of you have joined us today to listen, learn, and reflect. Most importantly, today's panel is focused on our graduate students and their training as the environmental leaders of tomorrow, in partnership with our Indigenous communities, knowledge, and rights holders. So please join us in building a welcoming virtual community. We would like everyone to turn on their cameras and give a wave even just for a moment.
All right, thank you for that, everyone. I'm going to go over just some quick Zoom ground rules before we begin. So everyone who is not a panelist should already be on mute and have their video off. So please confirm that. And if not, please mute and turn your video off now. Your chat facilitators today are Corey and Zoha. So please send your questions to them and they will pass them on to Colleen and I. This talk will be recorded and posted at a later date. I see that it's already recording. So thank you, technical team. And the format of the seminar will go as follows. The panelists will each introduce themselves and deliver an open discussion, which will last for about an hour. This panel will run a little longer than usual, but early career researchers are encouraged to stay for the last 30 minutes, which is focused on career mentorship Q&A style discussion with the panelists.
So Madison and I will provide some brief context to each of our speakers, and then we will turn it over to them to provide us with more information about themselves and their work, as well as an answer to the following question. Why is it important for Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities to come together, particularly young people, and especially early career researchers like those in the GLIER and TRUS programs? First, we'll start off with Mr. Clint Jacobs, then Dr. Valoree Gagnon, Dr. Myrle Ballard, and Ms. Dilber Yunus. So, Mr. Clint Jacobs is a member of the Walpole Island First Nation, supervisor at Nindawabjik and Walpole Island Heritage Center. He's the director of the Walpole Island Land Trust and is the first adjunct Indigenous scholar at the University of Windsor. He is engaged in a range of stewardship initiatives across the Kedwanong territory and habitats. He conceptualized and taught the University of Windsor's first ever land-based traditional ecological knowledge course and is engaged in multiple research partnerships. So Mr. Jacobs, are you there?
Yeah, bonjour. Good morning.
Bonjour, thank you.
Good morning.
Um, yeah, I'm Clint Jacobs. I'm from Gagnon. And just to answer those questions, it is why it's important. I think it's just opportunities for one another to learn and to share. And we're seeing that happening with our community in the University of Windsor and others. Um, Also to include Indigenous perspectives and ways of seeing things, different approaches to solutions and so on. Um, but it also helps to break down barriers, inequities, and also to kind of tackle racism. And particularly with young people, we're looking at opportunities for mentorship, passing on knowledge and wisdom, learning from experiences, and being together and supporting and being supportive in each other's roles. Miigwech.
Miigwech for those thoughtful words, Mr. Jacobs. Our next panelist is Dr. Valoree Gagnon. She is a mother of 4 boys and a community member in Keweenaw Bay, L'Anse, Michigan. She serves as Director for University Indigenous Community Partnerships, Great Lakes Research Center, and Research Assistant Professor for the College of Forest Resources and Environmental Science at Michigan Tech. With interdisciplinary expertise in environmental policy and food sovereignty, she focuses on sociocultural impacts of legacy toxic compounds and the policies intended to address them, particularly on Indigenous communities.
Thank you, Madison, and good morning, everyone. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge where I am right now this morning. And I am in L'Anse, Michigan, present-day Michigan. I am centered within the 1842 ceded territory of the Lake Superior Ojibwa people. And I am also within the boundaries of the L'Anse Indian Reservation established by the 1854 treaty with the Lake Superior Ojibwa. And thank you for the nice introduction and thinking about your question about the importance of partnerships that has everything to do with my everyday work, my service, and just part of who I have become. And I think in developing those partnerships, that's how we create those shared understandings, that we can listen to each other's voices and create shared vocabularies between us as well to communicate better with one another. And then there's also so much to be learned in having shared experiences. And so I think as far as youth and our students, it's so important to have those shared experiences with our communities in building those kinds of partnerships. Another part that's why it's so important to me in having those experiences together, that's really how we learn to be better observers, to be better learners. That's how we learn how to be better data stewards and also create meaningful interpretations, meaningful stories, not just to us as academics and students, but also the communities that we are serving. That's how we learn to align our research interests with community priorities. That's just really critical part of the work that you are all thinking about engaging in. And I will leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, Dr. Myrle Ballard is Anishinaabe from Lake St. Martin First Nation and faculty member at the University of Manitoba. A native speaker of Anishinaabewan, Dr. Ballard integrates science and Indigenous knowledge systems in her research on water and resource management.
So good morning. First of all, I want to acknowledge the lands that I'm on, which is a Treaty 1 territory, which is signatory with the Anishinaabe people and the Métis homelands. And I want to thank everybody, the organizers, for inviting me to this important panel. I guess a lot of what I was going to say was already mentioned by the previous two speakers. But I'll add to that. It's really important for Indigenous communities, non-Indigenous communities to come together and to include the young people, because we've been fighting for a long time for our Indigenous rights. And when I say Indigenous rights, we've been negotiating with the various parties at the United Nations level, fighting for the UNDRIP, which was accepted by Canada finally after many, many decades. And as well, two of the recommendations from the TRC. And within these two important documents, there's mentioned in there that traditional knowledge, Indigenous science needs to be recognized by the settlers, and that traditional knowledge and Indigenous science, or whatever you want to call it, I personally call it Indigenous science, but it needs to be incorporated into the university systems, and it needs to be incorporated within various governments, because we've been fighting a long time, and now is the time to incorporate Indigenous science into the curriculums. It has to be at the same level as Western science. It cannot be Indigenous science. It cannot be considered the weaker science, because we were here before the settlers, and it was the knowledge of the science that we had, why our people lived here, why we're still here. Can I leave it at that?
Thank you, Dr. Ballard, for those words. Our last panelist, last but not least, is Ms. Dilber Yunus, who is the Outreach Officer at the IISD Experimental Lakes area, located in Northwestern Ontario. She has a unique position and privilege of working with Indigenous communities and rights holders across Treaty 3 land where ELA is located. She participated in last year's IAGLIER conference, where she shared the importance of building relationships and friendships before pursuing the science at ELA, with multiple projects underway to engage youth, knowledge keepers, and elders.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dilber. First of all, I would like to start with acknowledging that IISD Experimental Lakes Area's head office is located on Treaty 1 traditional territory of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe Cree, Dakota and Dene peoples, and also on the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I would also like to acknowledge that our research facility, Experimental Lakes Area, is located in Treaty 3, traditional land of the Anishinaabe Nation, and also the homeland of the Métis Nation. So for those of you who are not familiar with Experimental Lakes Area, we are a nonprofit research organization. We do whole lake experiments to understand human impact on our freshwater ecosystem. So about myself, I am originally from China, and I moved to Canada about 10, 11 years ago to pursue my school education, and later started working with Experimental Lakes Area. I guess in order to answer that question, and I'm really honored to be on the panel, first of all, with Myrle, Clint, and Val, and I guess as a relatively younger generation on the panel, also to address your question about youth. I would like to really, I would like to start like sharing a little story of mine, if that's okay. Because I love listening to stories, and I love telling them as well. Like I said, I'm originally from China, and many of you probably know that there are 55 minority groups and 1 majority group in China. And I am actually from one of the minority groups by the name Uyghur. We have a very distinct language and cultural practice. Many of the minority groups, we have distinct language. And by distinct language and culture, I mean as different, like the difference between Ojibwe and English. And I think that's the comparison that I can come up with. From a very young age, my parents decided to send me to Chinese school, the Han Chinese school, the majority people. So the reason is there would be more job opportunities, and in terms of career and education, there would be more opportunities for me. So they sent me to Han Chinese school, and I still remember the first day I was at school, and I was under so much pressure because I could understand nothing. Except for ni hao, like probably most of you know ni hao, and except for ni hao, I understood nothing. So I ran home and cried, and I begged my parents to please send me back to my old school where I could understand what my classmates and teachers were saying. And I still remember my mom told me something that would encourage me throughout my life up until this moment. She said, Dilber, you're an Uyghur, which is my ethnicity, and you are creative and artistic in nature because it's in your blood. You will learn to be resilient and hardworking like Han Chinese population. And just imagine one day you will be capable of achieving when you are equipped with all these qualities. So I guess for the young people here, just imagine what you can do if you expose yourself to different worldviews and you know, share knowledge. Yeah, so I guess, I don't know, like I just felt like sharing that little story with you guys. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We are incredibly humbled that members from individuals from multiple nations and communities across Turtle Island are here today. Miigwech. If there are any members here today who would like to greet us in a good way, we welcome you to turn on your camera, and we would be happy to share the screen with you now.
All right. Thank you, and miigwech to our panelists for that intro to our discussion today. We will now move on to some other panel questions that we have prepared. So our first question for the panelists is, what benefits have you seen come out of these communities working together? And more importantly, what steps should universities be doing to make them more meaningful? And anyone may start for this question.
This is Myrle. I can start.
All right.
Yeah, I'm going to go further into what I talked about regarding the TRC and the UNDRIP. For the universities to make meaningful meaningful outcomes, what we have to do, when we talk about the TRC, we talk about the reconciliation. But I think what's missing is we never talk about the repatriation. That's very important. We need to bring that. To the forefront because repatriation is giving something back that was taken away, and then when we do that, and then we can reconcile. For example, the past policies where residential schools, you know, that knowledge of the culture was taken away from the people. Those knowledge of systems, that the language was taken away, which is so important because language is the indigenous science. That's where the words regarding the management, the systems within the water, that's where they're embedded within the words. And that's so important. I can't stress that enough. We need to repatriate the language. We need to give it back in order to reconcile properly. For example, in my language, we have nipe, which means water. We all know that. And then we have sibe, which means the river. Without nipe, there's no river. Then we have a Sagaigan, which means like a saga. When you translate it, it means what's going in and what flows out. That's what that means. So basically, so if you don't really understand these words, you're missing a concept, because with the Anishinaabe language, which I'm a fluent speaker, there's a component in there that I can never really translate across it to the non-speaker, like that whatever you want to call it is innate within me, like it's there, that linkage of the understanding of these words and the way they relate to the waters, to the systems, because within our words, we have ways of identifying the natural spots within the lakes and the rivers, and these natural spots refer to the natural law, the way they were created. And when the alteration starts, dams being built, etc., climate change, these things move, and that's what's missing with Western science. Kim, done.
Yeah, thank you, Myrle. I think I would like to add to all of what Myrle was sharing, and thinking about how do we make space for those kinds of understandings. And so much of the work that we're doing at Michigan Tech and with the Keweenaw Bay Indian community and other Great Lakes tribes is thinking about how do we make that space, like real space, in the different systems and the different structures that make up a university. And so much needs to be not just changed and integrated, but make its own space for Indigenous curriculum, Indigenous faculty, and some of the work that I've been doing, and I've seen a new openness for is thinking about like sponsored programs and having communities as research partners. I've just struggled for the past few years in finding the correct form, if you will, like checking the right boxes, when many times working with communities, they don't necessarily fit into the kinds of categories that universities have set up. And so I think a good example of that also is through research participation. And we have like internal review boards, and we think of this relationship as a researcher and with community members who want to engage in research. So much is framed as like subjects and objects of research. When human communities, especially the communities that I work with, they are not human subjects. They are research partners. They are my research partners. And so as I have continued to, come up against these kinds of barriers, and now getting so many questions from upper administration about how do we create that space? Why, instead of trying to make community and community members fit into the existing structures, how do we create new forms and new processes that better make space for Indigenous people and communities as research partners, not subjects?
Hi there. If I could add to that, I'd like to see institutions, and there's others that are leading in this. So there's examples out there already. Would it be nice if institutions can set up strategies that would include Indigenous perspectives and knowledge? implementing TRC call for actions, which includes hiring more Indigenous scholars, things like that.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit here as well. So when Myrle was talking about language, I think it reminds me of one of the projects that we're doing at ELA, collaborating with a few language experts, Ojibwe language experts from Treaty 3. And what we've been doing is translating a series of ELA's research infographic videos. They're very short videos, around 3 to 6 minutes or 3 to 5 minutes long. And we're trying to translate them into Ojibwe language. And of course, like our initial goal was to share our research findings with a broader audience. But it turns out this project turned out to be more than that. So one of the, again, like I love sharing stories. So one of the stories that came to mind is when we were sitting in one of our full day translation session with our elder and language expert and also published author, grandmother Nancy Jones from Nigigunsiminikanning First Nation. And she was asking us, because we were translating this video on mercury contamination in fish. And she was asking us, okay, so we were trying to explain the difference between mercury and methyl mercury, and she asked us the difference, and you know, where's mercury from? And we're like, okay, you can usually find it in rocks, and you know, in the environment, that it's a naturally occurring element in the environment. And then she's like, okay, so in Ojibwe culture, rock is animate. Rock has soul, but the way that we're describing mercury and methyl mercury is inorganic and methyl mercury is organic, so it's more like inanimate to animate, right? So then it's kind of like a different worldview. So then Nancy asked a really crucial question. So if rock is animate in my culture, then how come mercury is inanimate, aka inorganic? So we encounter these differences in viewing even like elements in our nature. So, but then beautiful things happen when, you know, two different worldviews come together. So I guess I just want to share the little story there, and just really resonate with me when Myrle said how important language is. Yeah.
If I could also add to, excuse me, for young people that are looking to do research with First Nation or Indigenous communities, really pay attention and focus on those research ideas that come from those communities, that truly benefit those communities. You may have your research, but and you'll get a degree out of that, but you got to think about what's going to be left behind with the community. So think about your research that may benefit the community in different ways, but also real tangible benefits. So things like add-on things where you can help support language resource tools or curriculum or other types of tools that the communities, individuals in the communities can use.
Thank you all for answering that first question so effectively. I want to build on our discussion about youth and the importance of youth engagement with traditional ecological knowledge as well as research. And we all know the answer to this, but if you could all explain from your own perspectives and experience, you know, why is it important to have the youth involved in environmental stewardship, and maybe also elaborate on some challenges that you may have faced in your own work regarding this? And what are some strategies you've been able to engage thoughtfully with the younger generation?
I can probably briefly start with this one. So at ELA, we do have a fully functioning education and outreach programming. And for us, of course, right now, the challenge is COVID, because we're not able to provide land-based, water-based education to students. But working with, and also through our many discussions with Treaty 3 communities and elders and knowledge holders. One of the, I'm not saying on behalf of the communities, it's just, it came up in a lot of the dialogues. One of the challenges that the communities face in terms of youth disconnecting with language and culture, and the other aspect is also maybe there are barriers in terms of engaging with science. So yeah, like, and then with ELA, because we are more Western science approach, but at the same time we are on a natural setting where we are on land and water. So it's kind of like a really good parallel in terms of what elders and knowledge keepers encourage students to go out on the land and on the water and in the nature and learn from nature itself. Yeah.
Dr. Ballard, I think you are on mute.
Yeah, I think it's really important to involve youth right from the start when we're doing work as well too. Not necessarily the work we do, but we need to encourage, for example, the schools to start involving the youth to have classes specific to environmental stewardship. I don't really like that word, stewardship, because stewardship is a Western term. We have a way of looking after the land around us, and it doesn't mean stewardship in my language. A lot of the words that we use, I can't even translate them into my language. But what I'm getting at is, for example, the transmission of language, we call it mother tongue. And what that means is it's the mother that has a primary role of teaching, passing on the language to the children. So we need to start coming up ways where maybe involve the parents in when we start planning, encouraging these kind of classes, passing on the learning, because the knowledge needs to be passed on. If we talk about youth, the knowledge needs to be passed on from an early age. By the time students, the youth learn about it, when they start learning about it, maybe at the university level, it'll be a second phase for them, like a second knowledge system, and it's not the primary knowledge. And the primary knowledge is what's needed in order to really impact the youth.
So I think I can add a little bit here as well. And here in Upper Michigan, it's a rural area, and so many youth, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, have lots of different kinds of relationships with the natural world around them. But I think, what we're really talking about with environmental stewardship is about care and recognizing the autonomy of wildlife, of plants, of trees, of water bodies. And so having the youth as a part of these programs, which in Keweenaw Bay Indian community, there's been a strong youth program for several years, and it's just been incredible to see where different youth end up taking really strong interest, whether that's fisheries or in forest, or the whole idea of gardens and medicine gardens as with teenage boys. They really engage with that quite a bit, and also want to share that. So when there are different educational tours, you know, at the Natural Resources Department or restoration areas, Keweenaw Bay Indian community also has their youth lead some of those. That is a really powerful thing to learn from youth, and also having adults learn with youth as well. I'll just stop there, and if anybody else wants to add to that.
I'm going to share a bit that I'd asked an elder in my community that you can see and feel and sense the love that he has for our home, for the lands and waters and air here. And I asked him, how do we get the kids to love this place just as much as he does? And his simple and wise response was, get them outside, get them outdoors. Over a decade ago, we did a research study and asking people, how do we bring our customary ways for caring for the land forward to this day, so that others can learn from that? And there were some remarkable interviews and stories that were shared. And I learned through that process that, you know, the typical education process where I've grown up, went to school, you're crammed and study a topic and you have to memorize it. I remember back in the day, you had to write all these things down 100 times on a board. And then you did a test and then you moved on to the next subject. Well, that's not the way our people help to guide the education of our young people. And that's what that elder was getting at. Get them outside so they can explore and discover, play, facilitate that connection to nature, guide their education by letting them think for themselves. Ask, what did you learn from that before we tell them all that we know. Help them to rate and connect to nature from pre-K on to 12 and beyond. Share our legends and stories. There's a lot of morals in those. Help the children to see everything in nature as all our relations. Help build that awareness that everything is connected. Nurture the understanding that what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. And thinking about those, right now that we tend to study problems. And so we're also reacting to issues and matters that, instead of looking at how we can prevent them to begin with. So I think that should be our focus, and how can we not create the problems through the technologies and things that we develop. How can we live in balance with the land, water, and air, one another? Which.
I just wanted.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to just real quick emphasize something that Dr. Jacobs said that may not have stuck out much, but he mentioned about youth from, and so in thinking out being in the natural world and how much you can learn from the water, how much you can learn from gardens and plants. And I think that has been like one of the biggest transitions in my own thinking. Actually, it's a lesson that comes from Robin Wall Kimmerer, and when she's talking about the differences between Western sciences and Indigenous knowledge systems, is that Indigenous knowledge systems learn from, and Western scientists learn about. And it's a really different way of thinking about the lessons and the teachings that are a part of the land.
I wanted to also share a little bit. I was supervising a PhD candidate from Western, and she has these two boys, and she was out. She she was analyzing those interviews that we did through that project I mentioned a decade ago. And she applied that sense of asking children, what did you learn? And one day she was sitting at the picnic table with her son and seen this bee kind of coming in and kind of hit the table, and he was about to bolt and run away. And what she said, just wait, let's watch this bee and see what it does. So he sat, and the bee kind of was heavy with pollen, and it started adjusting pollen from its body, moving it, taking some of it off, adjusting, and then after a while, it flew off in a nice straight line. And she applied what she heard through those interviews from our people here and asked that question, what did you learn from that? And his response was something that really hit me, because he stated a law that we have, our people, and his response was to his mom's question was, you don't take more than you need. And it was, to me, it was really profound, because he learned from nature. That's one of our laws. You don't take more than you need. And it gave me hope that our lands across this place, across Ontario, are going to heal if we allow the kids to connect to nature and learn from it themselves before we kind of share everything that we need to share with them. So it really stuck in my heart and I helped me have hope for the future, that if we allow and enable and facilitate young people learning from nature first off, and exploring and making those deeper connections, that they're going to find answers to help heal this lands, our water, our air, and so that we're all supporting the continuity of life and the continuation of life. Sorry. Anyhow, miigwech.
Can I also add something here to encourage youth, hopefully? So when Myrle, again, when you were talking about how important language and how it's challenging actually to interpret or translate something in between two languages. So throughout my outreach work, I did, particularly in 2019, because I was able to go to gatherings and ceremonies and forums. So one of the things I've learned, I've heard repeatedly from knowledge holders and elders is water is life, water has spirit, water takes life, water gives life. So it's something that was repeated many times if you go to a lot of the ceremonies and gatherings, and I guess many of you can resonate with that. So I started thinking, okay, so yeah, I get it. Like, yes, water is life. Water is like gives life, and water, you know, it has spirit. So what it really means, and I think later on, after I learned a bit more about the Ojibwe language itself, because Ojibwe language, I'm not sure if I'm right, Myrle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Ojibwe language in comparison to English, Ojibwe is verb-based and English is noun-based. And something clicked in my brain, because I'm also from a multilingual background. So something clicked and I'm like, oh, okay, so there must be many actions built into what elders were trying to tell us here. So I think two key takeaway for me, and I hope that I can tell youth here, is one is inspiration, and just, you know, when you repeatedly hear elders telling you the same teaching, sometimes don't go away because there's a deeper meaning to the word itself because of the barrier in between two languages. And I think elders are just trying really hard to try to, you know, interpret what they know in their own language into English, and it is challenging because many meaningful things is perhaps are perhaps lost in translation. And the second thing is curiosity, and always keep a curious mind, because knowledge is endless. And I think just expose yourself to different worldviews, different knowledge systems, and just equip yourself, and yeah, you will gain more qualities.
And can I add to that too? When we talk about water, we have a lot of words for water, not exactly water per se, but related to water. For example, when I was visiting with the knowledge holders, with the elders, they talk about water when they were traveling around, living on the land, doing their traditional activities, preparing for the winter. They would spend the summers on the land, and they never took any water with them. When we go out on land, we have to take lots of water, but them, they just went out because they got the water directly from the land. They dug holes in the ground and the water would pop up, and and they would judge by the way the water looked. But back then, they could get water from wherever. And they shared stories with me when they used a certain tree. They got that stick, and they used this stick to determine where the water spots were. They just like point the branch to the ground, and where the water was, the branch started to shake. So there's so many things we can learn from them. And then during the summer, they have there's so many different words for water. They have the various categories of water. There's mukijuabo, which means the natural water coming from the ground, and this could be from the land or else from the water itself. There's water spots, natural spots within the water. There's water that's used from snow. You don't just go scoop snow and melt it. It has to be a certain texture. It has to be from a certain depth. And there's words that name the various layers of the snow, and it has to be the right layer to use for boiling water. There's so many things words with water.
All right, thank you, panelists. I'm sure everyone here will be reflecting on these stories as well when they leave today. So now I will move on to our next question. It's speaking of our youth in the future, how does climate change have an intergenerational effect, and how can we address it?
Maybe I can start if no one else wants to start. I'm going to share a story of flooding, because of flooding we associate right now, well, I shouldn't say right now, but flooding tends to be associated with the climate change. My community, where I'm from, we were 100% displaced, first displaced in 2011 by flooding, but the flooding was not natural. The stories that were shared with me talk about flooding, the natural floods that occur. Flooding is water. And what happens, the story is flooding occurs because it's the way the natural law is designed, the way the creator, God, designed the ecosystem, the earth that we live on. Flooding occurs approximately every 50 years, give or take 5 years or so. But it occurs naturally. When flooding used to occur, when flooding used to occur in my community, the elders shared the stories with me. where they used to leave the flooded community and go to the other side with a little bit of like a higher ground. And that's where they spent the summers waiting for the land to rejuvenate itself, they call it, because the land replenished itself naturally. And that's what the flooding is. But today we have flooding, and Western science builds all these dams. Oh, we got to prevent flooding. But this is a natural occurrence that today, because of a technology that messed with it, it just makes it worse. And that's the same with the climate change too. We don't have any words for climate change. We know the elders observe weather patterns and the changes. They say Nemega and Dan, that's what they say, which I translate to, it's getting, what's the word? I think it's easier for me to speak in my language, but there's no language speakers here. Nemega and Dan means when they make an observation, like it sticks out to them, where they think about the past to the present. And they can make these the observations that they have about climate. For example, they base the observations which way the leaves turn when it's going to rain, the way the sun sets, the color of the sunset, the way the clouds are moving, and the sound of the wind, like the sound of the rain. These are all part of their knowledge of weather patterns, which relate, which they have knowledge of the climate, and they view like the flooding. They have knowledge of cycles, like these need to occur because it's a way of this Mother Nature cleansing itself, regenerating itself. I'll stop there.
So I'll add a little bit to climate change and intergenerational impacts. And when I think of climate change and impacts, I'm thinking about specifically like the rate of change being rapidly increased, and some of those impacts across the landscape. And we tend to think of climate change impacts on human communities, I think, more than we talk about impacts to more than human communities. And I've learned so much that around here that we really need to be learning more from the more than human communities around us. A handful of years ago, I learned about a study that GLIER was doing, Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, a phenology study about the different seasons and cycles and relationships between different species or beings, and how those timing of when a person might see the first apple blossom or see the first walleye come in upstream, how those were changing. And then not just individual beings, but what about the overlap with apple blossoms and pollinators? And so these kinds of fast-paced rate of changes that are taking place are greatly, it's outpacing the rate at which not just humans can adapt, but many other kinds of species and beings as well. And so those are things that I would like us to just really widen that conversation about the impacts of climate change and intergenerational. And I'm sure Dr. Ballard could speak more to this as others could as well, but think of whole language systems tied to those relationships. And if those relationships are not taking place, and then part of that language is also displaced.
If we have a little bit of time, I can add on a little bit here. I guess let me just look at the question again. Climate change, generational. Okay, so I think I wrote down 2 items here, interconnectedness. I just want to refer back to what Clint said earlier about interconnectedness, and in terms of climate change crisis like this, there are so many variables and factors related to climate change. So maybe expand your knowledge, and also, apart from looking into climate change and its impact on the environment, and also how it's changing things socially, economically, and also culturally as well. Yeah, because it's such a big topic. There are many variables. And the second thing is, I wrote down talk to elders. This is very important. And I think, especially for young people, maybe you were born after, climate change became a big thing. So definitely talk to elders, talk to the older generations in your family, or elders and knowledge keepers, or wisdom keepers, especially within your access. Definitely reach out to them and talk to them, and you will find a tremendous amount of wisdom there. Yeah.
I just want to add that focusing on the young people here, I guess probably everybody, when election times come around, vote for those that are supporting dealing with this issue of climate change. But also support with your funds, donate to organizations that are tackling climate change. Maybe you're going to go work for them. I don't know. Apply what you can. There's just, we all have to learn how to adapt. It's on it. It's here. We're living with it. So your research might help support adaptation.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. As I'm watching the time now, the hour already went by, and I see there's a lot of questions. So we're going to now move on to the Q&A portion. So yes, I'll pass it off to Colleen to start with the first question.
Before we begin, are there any lingering thoughts or comments from our panelists that they would like to speak to prior to engaging with the audience questions?
No, not for me. Not for me. I think by answering questions, I guess we'll probably touch on more topics.
That's very true. Okay, thank you. So the first question from the audience asks, what is a key barrier in terms of bringing Indigenous knowledge to the mainstream?
Yeah, I think the key barrier is being an Indigenous scholar in a faculty that's so heavy in science, Faculty of Science, Chemistry Department. Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous science is not given at the same weight, and I think that's why we run into a lot of problems when we try and justify with the decision makers in using Indigenous science in their management tools. I still hear people say, and it just gets me riled up, when I hear that Indigenous science is referred towards anecdotal evidence. I hate that term. And I think as an Indigenous scholar, Indigenous scientist, I'll call myself, because I have the best of both worlds, I'm gonna try and do my best to detract the people from using that term. If I hear that, I'm going to sit down with them, and I'm going to educate them. That's what I'm going to do.
I just wanted to add to that, and so many of us think about Indigenous science being dramatically different from Western science, and there are differences, but Indigenous ways of knowing are also science. So like an elder here in Keweenaw Bay once said, Indigenous knowledge is science with respect.
I think for me, I wrote down communications, and I think communications is very important, especially we have to acknowledge that we're all holding different sets of values and worldviews, and it's important to share those worldviews with one another with respect and with honesty. A lot of my work boils down to really building very good friendships first with individuals. And that's how a lot of our work have been made possible. And it does boils down to one-on-one, honest and sincere a relationship that you build with individuals. Yeah.
I'll add that I'd encourage you to lobby your institutions for to make institutional change, implement those, create strategies that will support break down those barriers, supporting Indigenous peoples and perspectives to be included within the systems. Yeah, and then challenge it wherever you see there's those barriers. Ask for advice, go to elders, reach out to anybody, just any of the communities that are around part of your institutions. I'm sure there's visiting elders that attend your institutions, and maybe you can reach out to them and talk to your deans, ask your professors, talk to whoever. How are they addressing things? And if they're not, then push them, challenge them, invite us to help. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our next audience question. So Dan asks, I'm interested in Indigenous partners and practices in 3 specific ecological areas. The first being encouragement of biodiversity, second, control of invasive species, and 3, fire suppression using controlled burning. Are there any case studies, success stories, best practices, and are they being implemented anywhere?
I can add here at Keweenaw, those things are just being lived. They're being done. They're not necessarily studied through research, but a lot of communities are looking for those types of supports. Kind of telling our stories and documenting what's done. There's so much work that needs to be done. We just don't have time to kind of document our stories, and because they're just one after another. There's so many different things that we have to tackle, and I don't look back that often, so it'd be helpful if you can reach out to communities and ask, can you help document processes and that we could share with others. We often invite folks just to come take part in some of the work. Yeah.
I think like Dr. Jacobs said, we have our own way. Like, we don't really have them documented, because a lot of our elders, knowledge keepers, they're not the academic researchers where they have to document everything. It's all it's all banked in memory. It's not banked in a library. And there's a lot of knowledge out there. For example, invasive species. I've heard people started talking about invasive species 20, 30 years ago. For example, in northern Manitoba, they have species there that have never been seen before. One of these is skunk, for example, you know, things we normally take for granted in the South. And another species are wood ticks. So my mother, when she talks about the abundance of wood ticks now, she says, we never had wood ticks growing up. We never had to worry about them. The same with mosquitoes. They never had a problem with mosquitoes. We're in Manitoba. You know, mosquitoes are our neighbors now. We have such a big problem. We have a problem with mosquitoes that goes back to the Lake Agassiz when the different landforms before the way it is now, you know, it's all cyclical. It's all based on cycles. So these are the things we need to consider, like, you know, before the weather patterns, the climates we have now, it was different way back. And the species we call invasive, they lived in the former, not the way we're used to now, and not these climates and these regions that we have now, and they didn't have those. And we need to, I think, we need to start incorporating a lot of the previous knowledge of the way it was before the landforms before, based on the current, because the current landforms, you know, it's all cut and they're subdivided. When you travel by air and you look down into land, you can see everything is blocked off sections, and that's all you see when you travel throughout the South. Miigwech.
This is more of an Indigenous knowledge question, I think, focused on. So I'm just going to sit back and listen and learn and take notes from the other three panelists.
I think something that I want to, I need to share, and even the terminology that we use, like invasive species, and that term and what it is trying to convey, something negative or unwanted. And here also thinking about, because we are supposed to be learning from our plant relatives and from insects, and so what can we learn from species moving into different regions, and knowing that people also used to move across the landscape, and now we have like artificial barriers, lines on a map that aren't in real space. And so everything on the landscape is moving except for humans, and we call the other movement invasive. And just trying to think also that they have their own jobs to do, other beings. And so just hearing some elders and community members talk about like different species and consider why they might be here. What purpose would they be serving? And our plant relatives took that same commitment that humans did to care for one another. So we don't know why different species are around and what they might be trying to show us and how they might be trying to care for us. And so we just have to be careful about some of the terms that we use, but also what they're conveying to everyone else.
Thank you everyone for your responses. Definitely a lot of food for thought. Our next question, we have a lot of elder interviews, examples of local TEK, and so much, and now we face how to get this information into our database, search engines, and are struggling. So this person's asking, does anyone have any experience or advice in this area?
Could you repeat that beginning part, Colleen, please?
Yep. We have a lot of elder interviews, examples of local TEK, and so much more information. And now we are facing some struggles on how to get this information into our database search engines. Does anyone have any experience in this area or advice? So I think like data management in general.
So who is we? Is that an Indigenous group, a non-Indigenous group?
I don't have the name attached to the question. So it sounds like somebody representing a research endeavor that they're working on.
You need to be careful about storing the data. If it's not your data, you have to ask for consent from the community, because a lot of Indigenous knowledge, it belongs with the community. It doesn't belong with the university. So I would be very careful where you store that. I know that a lot of the ethics around getting the knowledge, and then, like I said, Indigenous knowledge belongs in the memory, doesn't belong in the libraries.
Yeah, and this, just to clarify, this might be a question posed by a community member as well. I'm not exactly sure if it's a researcher or community member. I guess if somebody did ask that question that's still here, maybe they could elaborate.
If I can add to that, yeah, that's really important about the ethics, ensuring that the people that were interviewed consent, and that they have that material themselves in their hands. They might decide to update or revise their what was shared. We're also looking at that how do we get those. I mentioned that we did interviews, and we continually do those every once in a while, trying to learn from our community members. But how do we, and then the people that were involved in transcribing and recording those interviews, a few of them said those interviews changed their lives. And so for me, I also kind of looking at that question, how do we get that information into the minds and hearts of our young people so that they can too change their lives? Because there's so many stories and things that are shared within those interviews that need to be heard. It's difficult, yeah. Anyhow, so that's I'm too looking at trying to find ways that we can make sure that that information is shared. Back in the day, it was shared through one-on-one teachings and sharing of knowledge, passing on that from generation to generation. Our people have been, lives have been disrupted by all the genocidal practices and things, residential school that disrupted that passing on of knowledge. So we're having to use these modern technologies to kind of capture that knowledge. And we got to be careful, because there's, in my opinion, that knowledge has spirit, and we have to respect it. And that's when people hear that stories or whatever else that's shared from other elders, it affects their mind processes, their heart, everything. And so, yeah, anyhow, I too am looking at that question. How do we, in a modern context, how do we make sure that our young people are hearing those stories and learning from them?
Yeah, thinking a little bit more about that question, and I'll respond in a way as if that's coming from tribal communities, and I have been working with some communities who are interested in storing their own data and having ownership of their own data, and thinking about what are the best practices, but also what's the best software and hardware as well. And then how can communities use those stories to be able to share those teachings with more people in their community, family, the youth. And so here in Keweenaw Bay Indian community, something that's really has a big interest here is story mapping. And so, because so many of those stories are like tied to specific places and specific practices and families. And so tying those practices to the land through story mapping can be a beautiful way to share that with community members, and also with students and the academic community as well. They are just becoming such an important tool. And so we can continue to have these kinds of conversations, because so much of the ownership of those stories, and it's not just about reconciliation or repatriation, but also rematriation, because those stories are living, they're still alive, those teachings are still alive. And so how can we work with our communities to ensure that the knowledge is with the communities, they're making the decisions about the knowledge and how to use them. And researchers should just be facilitators, and matching skills and to put the community priorities first.
Yeah, if I can just quickly add in here, I think this question is also a great opportunity for me to learn and to remind myself when I learn the teachings that I get from elders in my work, in my interaction with them, and what to share, what not to share. And I think it's a really important topic to discuss further. And I really resonate with what Dr. Jacobs said. And yeah, like if I would love to be part of the thought process as well, and figure out how we can move forward in this area.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. So Jessica asks, could the panelists take a few moments to share stories of joy or success in their communities and or research that incorporate themes spoken about today, like reconciliation, youth involvement, or genuine partnership?
That's a big question. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just, miigwech, I'd like to, one success stories, and I see these as building and growing upon one another, but we have a wonderful relationship with the University of Windsor Great Lakes Institute for Environmental Research, is also with the Healthy Headwaters Lab. They're employing some Indigenous students and scholars to tackle real life challenges and issues that we're facing in our community. So their work is developing tangible benefits that our community is actually benefiting from. One wonderful thing that I love is that they're involving young people and helping the young people connect with home, but also through the academic institution, furthering their knowledge, connecting them to our languages and teachings, and also with science. We have a few of them, they're helping us develop GIS capacity. We had that capacity back in the day. Our funding kind of goes up and down depending on different governments, but they're helping us kind of rebuild that and pick that up and build that capacity here. Also, another wonderful thing through the Healthy Headwaters Lab is they're involving local environmental artists and sharing their gifts that they have. That's what I really appreciate is that they're helping our young people shine and kind of use the gifts that they're blessed with, and not just having an impact at the institution there, but also having an impact with our community, with other First Nation communities. So yeah, I love the fact that we have Mariah and Destiny and others that are working with the Healthy Headwaters Lab. So miigwech to them if they're here. And miigwech to Catherine and Candy and everyone else there, Chris. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Clint.
Dr. Ballard, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll just say that I think for myself, in working with the elders and visiting them and hearing them, I've always heard them say that they want to be in a room together to share their stories. And I did that a couple of times where I got them all together for them to share stories, because once you get them in a room together, you can't stop them. And I just love listening to them. Yeah, because there's the stories that they have. They share them with a passion, and there's always laughter when they start talking about their ways or the way they grow up being on the land. They're always laughing, and just being around them, it's so invaluable. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I have a lot of hope now, and into the future when we think about even having this platform and panel, and how students are super curious about traditional knowledge and Indigenous people, and how that can shape who they are and the work that they do. This is a really exciting time to be doing this kind of work. When I've always been excited to do this kind of work. I've been doing this now for about a dozen years. But when I first started out, there weren't nobody at my institution doing this kind of work. And now there's so much curiosity. The courses like this are becoming more asked for. These kinds of platforms, I mean, you easily hit over 100 people. These things didn't happen 5 years ago. And so it just, for me, it's so hopeful. And I just want to thank you students for taking the initiative to put this together. That right there, I mean, that's huge. I mean, to me, students are the rock stars. So Thank you so much. You give all of us hope.
Well, I guess I have 1 minute. I can probably chime in here. So I guess for us, the success story, there are so many individual stories that I can share with you. Yeah, definitely reach out to me if you'd like to, share stories and just exchange, knowledge and information. But one success story that I can think of is probably our collaboration. I mean, if I bring it to more like institutional collaboration, would be our collaboration with Grand Council Treaty 3 and University of Manitoba on Treaty 3's community-based monitoring program. And I think collaborations like this with multiple stakeholders and multiple sectors coming together for a mutual goal. And I think these type of collaborations are so needed. And definitely if you're a scientific organization or university or any other or indigenous organization, definitely reach out to your local organizations where you have, you can bring in all different expertise into a project and work together. Yeah, and learn from each other. That's the most important.
Before I give our closing remarks, I just want to make sure there weren't any other lingering thoughts or comments from our panelists. Thank you so much. Yep, that is the last question that we'll have time for today. From all of us at both GLIER and TRUST, we would like to extend our thanks, miigwech, to our panelists and to all those who attended. We appreciate every individual sharing thoughtful answers to the questions and for being here today. And then just a final reminder, please join us at our next panel. It will include members of nonprofits on February 12th, that's a Friday. It'll be the same time, 10 a.m. And we hope to see you then. Thank you.
Omapi, take care.
Miigwech, it's been a pleasure.
Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Thank you very much.